This is the case of Johnny Frank Garrett and how he killed a nun, and some people think he might be innocent, as well as his last words being debatable. If you want to know more about his case, please continue watching.
You are watching Roll a Mile in My Shoes TV.
When many people think of Halloween, they think of children dressing up in costumes, going door to door saying trick or treat and asking for candy. But I don't think this is what Halloween was meant to be used for. In fact, I don't think Halloween was meant to be used as a marketable commercial concept at all. I've heard several wives' tales, and one of those tales that sticks out to me is that in certain cultures, Halloween was used as a time or a day that people could walk the street or walk around freely without being harassed by the dead and their spirits. And so they would dress up in these costumes so that the deceased couldn't tell them from actual living people, and they could just walk around free and not have to be harassed by spirits or the people that have passed on. But I don't know if this is true because, like I said, it's an old wives' tale, but I think it is actually an interesting one to say the least. I think that sometimes people use Halloween as a way to commit crimes and hopefully not be held accountable for their actions, like this man here, Mr. Johnny Frank Garrett, because the story goes that on October 31st of 1981, Sister Tadia Benz, a Catholic nun, was brutally raped and murdered by this man here, Mr. Johnny Frank Garrett, in the St. Francis Convent in Amarillo, Texas. And I think that he was hoping that since it was Halloween, people would think that he was possessed by a spirit, and this could help him get off for the crime that he committed. Now, Garrett lived across the street from the Covenant, as I had said earlier, and he would later be convicted and sentenced to death for killing the 76-year-old nun, Tadia Benz. And they would also find a lot of evidence that prove that he killed her, but some people still think that he's innocent. In the aftermath, two things would be disputed: whether Garrett actually committed the crime, because some people thought that he was innocent, and whether his last infamous words were actually spoken. And some people say that, he said certain things as his last words, and some people say that he didn't say these as his last words. And we'll break this down later in the story of what they have quoted him as saying and what some people actually think he said. The morning after the murder had occurred, Benz's body was found by another nun, and Benz was found naked with blood on her face in the Covenant's community room, and the window was broken. The sisters called the police, who collected evidence that included a knife under the bed. Benz's bed liners, fingerprints were lifted from the knife's blade. So basically, they collected her bed liners, and the knife that was found under her bed had prints on it, and they lifted the prints from that knife. And they also took her headboard as evidence. And they also found a cut window screen. And in addition to all of this, they found an additional kitchen knife, which was found in the driveway outside. Now, later, it is said that a witness saw Garrett running away from the covenant, or the direction, running away from the direction of the covenant. And this is why he was also believed to have been convicted, because not only was he seen running away from that direction, remember, he lived across the street from the covenant. Now, I have to kind of wonder now, was this the only thing that was across the street from his residence? Was it just the covenant? Was there a store or another business that could have been open around that time that he could have been running from just to, get home? And this is why people were thinking that he could have been innocent. I mean, these are questions that have to be asked. And, I know that people might think that, that could have been the only place that he could have been running away from, since seeing as what happened. But I have to ask that question: was there another business nearby that he could have been coming from, like a store or, something else? Or was the covenant the only building or, thing across the street that he could have been coming from, that night? But after all these questions are asked, and some might not have been answered, the autopsy was done, and it revealed stab wounds continuous to the head and abrasive injuries to the neck. The pathologist ruled that the cause of death was manual strangulation. Additional signs of external bleeding and internal trauma indicated forcible rape. This is, kind of weird that, I mean, I know that people are people no matter their religion or things of that nature, but it's kind of weird that a person who is young would want to, I guess you could say, rape a nun. And especially, seeing as she was like 76. I mean, she's still a woman nonetheless, but I just find it weird that he would think that that was something that was okay to do. Now, remember, I had said earlier that on the night of the murder, a witness claims to have seen Garrett running from the direction of the convent. And not only that, the kitchen knife that was found in the driveway also matched the design, make, and degree of use as a knife recovered from Garrett's home. Now, I'm really, really wondering, why would someone use a knife or a weapon that, could easily be traced back to them? But I guess when you have, killing someone or whatever on the brain, you don't think these things through clearly sometimes. And this is what can come back to bite you in the butt. But good for him that he didn't think this through clearly, because he could have, potentially gotten away with this if these police hadn't have collected all this evidence. But Johnny Frank Garrett was arrested on November 9th, 1981. And this is crazy, but that was 4 years before I was born. At the trial, the prosecution said that he raped and then strangled Benz to death. Garrett he maintained his innocence, but I'm one of the few people that are on the other side of the fence about whether he did this or whether he didn't, but I stand with I think he's guilty side of the fence. But he was found guilty even though he maintained his innocence, and he was sentenced to death. He was then placed on death row in Texas's Ellis Unit Prison. Garrett was set to be executed on January 6, 1992. However, he was given a reprieve by Governor Ann Richards at the request of Pope John Paul II. Ultimately, however, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 17-0 to uphold the death sentence instead of commuting it to life in prison. And I think that is so fitting and correct for what he did to this 76-year-old nun. And I think that he, should have been put to death sooner. But I know these things take time, but, that's just my opinion of it. On February 11th, 1992, at the age of 28, Frank Garrett was executed by lethal injection. His last meal was ice cream, but his last words, as I said earlier, remain in dispute. Garrett was quoted as saying, "I'd like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my ass." Now, this is what people are saying that, he was quoted as saying, but some people are saying that he didn't say this, and some people are wondering if he said anything at all. After his execution, speculation continued as to his potential innocence and the humanity of his execution in general. Mentally impaired and suffering brain damage, a mental health expert described Garrett as one of the most virulent histories of abuse and neglect I have encountered in 28 years of practice. Garrett was allegedly raped regularly, beaten by his stepfather, and forced to perform sexual acts for pornographic films. His family introduced him to drugs and alcohol when he was just 10 years old. He was exposed to brain damage, substance like paint thinner. This information was presented to the jury during his trial. Now, what I want to know is, why was there nobody to say that, okay, when this child went to school, why didn't some people notice things that were off or that could have been wrong with him to help him do better or get better from these drugs that he was being introduced to? Why was nobody there to say, okay, his home living situation is not fit for a child? I mean, anything. I know there probably was no such thing as CPS or whatever back then, but I mean, somebody could have stepped in and tried to help this man, and maybe this wouldn't have happened. But then again, I have to really ask the question, was he really as brain damaged as people are making him out to be? Because I mean, most brain damaged people, well, I can't say most, but some brain damaged people, depending on how bad their brain damage is, wouldn't really commit a crime in the first place. And if they did, they wouldn't know that it was something wrong that they have done, and they wouldn't know to run or, run away from the scene at all. So this makes me wonder, did he really, was he really brain damaged? Did he really know what he was doing? If so, how bad was the brain damage? Because do most brain damaged people, depending on the severity, know right from wrong and know to run away? And then you have to think about the amount of force that he had to use to strangle this lady. And then not only that, he raped her. So I really have to wonder and ask, was this man really brain damaged, or was this just a tactic that his lawyer had to use to try to get the charges dropped or get him acquitted or just get him off altogether? I mean, I have to ask these questions, because as I said earlier, I'm on the side of I think he's guilty. So, I have to ask these questions as well. Even though I have said many times in this video that Garrett might be guilty of this crime, I had to sit back and think about it, because as I did more reading on this case, is seen that separate from the issue of abuse, DNA evidence found in 2004 linked another criminal, a man named Leonzo Perez Rubio, to the murder of Benz. Rubio pled guilty to a crime that took place a few months prior to Benz's killing, the rape and murder and of a woman named Box Bryson. Now, it's kind of strange that they are saying that, prior to, killing, prior to Garrett killing the nun, they find, evidence that might, I guess, prove that Garrett wasn't guilty, I guess. So I guess they're saying that this man Rubio committed this crime because they also find DNA linking him to another crime. So I guess that they're saying that's why they think that Garrett is innocent and he's not the one who committed the crime. And if so, this man should have been charged, if he was still alive, at this point, but he's probably not. So, that could have a lot to do with it. But I think that if he is found to be the guilty party in the rape of this woman, the nun, Sister Benz, he should be, the record should be set straight and he should be named as the one who murdered or, murdered and possibly raped her. Also, the Texas attorney Jesse Quackenbush was so intrigued by the case that he made a documentary called The Last Word about Johnny Frank Garrett's case. He argued that the case was the result of overzealous prosecutors saying the old and newly discovered evidence of Johnny Frank Garrett's innocence is so compelling it would cause even the most bloodthirsty proponents of the death penalty to shake their head in doubt. As Garrett's last words, despite the widely reported and repeatedly quoted final remark made by Garrett, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice website states that he declined to make a final statement. And this is really strange because, as it states earlier in the video, I had said that he said that he would like to thank his family for taking care of him and loving him, but as the rest of the world, they could kiss his ass. Now, I wonder why many people would even say that these were this man's, final words. And then the Department of Criminal Justice says that he declined to make a final statement. I mean, y'all have already vilified this man in life, saying that he, committed a murder and rape of a nun. Y'all didn't think this was bad enough, but to add insult to injury, you had to say that this man said something as his final words that he didn't. I mean, y'all should have let the fact that y'all were executing the man be bad enough. But I guess that wasn't, a thing back then, to leave well enough alone. But if you guys like this video, please don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. And don't forget to share this video and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you guys on the next one.